Today we're discussing a lot of information that came from a Saturday headline segment on Hockey Night in Canada, including the fact that Oliver Ekman Larsson's back on the market. Plus, there's also word that the Chicago Blackhawks might be involved in the Jack Eichel sweepstakes. We also have some more award winner announcements and some coaching updates as well. We'll jump into all the latest news coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as I mentioned, we have a lot to cover here today. First up, I want to talk about the Montreal Canadiens and head coach Dominic Ducharme. Of course, most of you likely know by now, has unfortunately come down with a COVID positive situation, so he has not been able to be around the team and had to miss the last game, of course, their first home game in this series, which they did end up winning and now have a 2-1 series lead against Vegas. But it looks as though, based on what Chris Johnson was saying on headlines, is that he will have to isolate for a 14-day period. I know the Montreal Canadiens are trying to work with health officials to see if there's any way to get an exception to that. Sometimes I know in some areas you can only isolate for like 5 to 7 days, and if you're negative at that point, you can be released. But this is a situation where he's been positive. He's not just isolating because of an exposure or because he traveled somewhere or something that a lot of other people have had to deal with. So, they went through 2 tests to make sure this was accurate before this happened. So it's surprising that no players of any kind are positive at this point. Doesn't mean it couldn't happen down the road. I know Ducharme in a Zoom interview earlier today did talk about the fact that the protocols are really tight. He says he did not stray from any of them. He was basically between the rink and the hotel, in the same areas that the players would have been. And he doesn't really have any idea how he would have picked it up. He does not have any symptoms either. He's not symptomatic. So he has been able to communicate with the team like over Zoom and obviously through electronic means, but not the same being there. But Luke Richardson will continue to run the bench, and we'll see. But if he does end up in the full 14-day isolation, then it's a guarantee he'll miss the remainder of this series. And if the Montreal Canadiens are successful in defeating Vegas and go on to the Stanley Cup final, he would even miss the first little bit of that as well. So unfortunate set of circumstances for Ducharme, and we'll have to see if there's any way they can get some sort of an exception. I mean, he says he had his second dose of COVID-19 vaccine. It was just a little bit shy of the 14 days, and I believe all the players, or at least the ones who wanted it, which I'm not sure what the percentages are, but it's a high number, I do believe, have had theirs as well. So when you're around a full group of people that have been vaccinated, you've been vaccinated yourself, it does seem like the risks are pretty low. It's a rare circumstance. So I don't know. We'll have to monitor the situation and see if anything more comes from it. But as of now, 14 days is what he is looking at. Now, there was also word on headlines that we might see some coaching changes within the Toronto Maple Leafs organization, and it's only due to the fact that the Maple Leafs assistants, apparently 2 of them, and we don't know who they are, exactly what's being offered, but they apparently have opportunities at other roles that they're being considered and interviewed for. And it sounded like, based on what Elliot Friedman was saying, that they have been granted permission to at least talk to those other options. So there could be some changes coming if they're offered those jobs and they accept. So we'll see. I mean, I don't know what exactly they are. I mean, I know there's obviously guys like Paul McLean is on the staff. You've got Dave Hackstall. You've got Manny Malhotra. It could be their goalie coach. I really don't know what the opportunities were, but there could be changes coming to Sheldon Keefe's staff. But if those opportunities don't turn out to be job offers and they don't accept, then it is expected that the Maple Leafs will return in the fall for next season with the same coaching staff. So we'll have to see what comes from those other opportunities there. The NHL continues to make announcements on the award winners, and we now have the Lady Byng Trophy winner, which is defenseman Jacob Slavin. Slavin's a well-deserving recipient here, only the 4th defenseman in NHL history to win this award. It's quite remarkable if you look at it. He played just shy, I believe it was like 1,200 minutes. It was a really high amount. We know he's logs a ton of minutes for the Hurricanes, and he only had 1 penalty all season, and if I'm not mistaken, I believe it was a puck over glass scenario, so it's not even like a stick infraction, which are more common on defensemen. So considering how many minutes he plays, and I know there's also some stats, I don't have them right in front of me here, about how many times he used his stick to break up plays and everything, never to get called on a penalty is quite remarkable. So that's quite something. Jared Spurgeon and Austin Matthews were also the runners-up, but in my opinion, I know some people were pretty high on some of the top scorers not taking a lot of penalties, but to me, it's a lot harder to do if you're playing defense, and some of the top defensemen in the league who can go an entire season with next to no penalties certainly are the most deserving, generally speaking, in my opinion. So it's nice to see Slavin get recognized. He's one of the most underrated defensemen in the NHL, and I think if he played in a different market, he certainly would be more likely to get attention. But considering he does play in Carolina, it goes to show how good he is if obviously he's winning one of these big awards. Now, it's also believed that the Seattle Kraken are inching closer and closer here to naming their very first ever head coach in Kraken history. It's believed that Ron Francis wants to make this announcement sometime, ideally before the end of June, but I think they would likely push it into July if they feel like they need the time, but they may not. I mean, we still have a number of days left this month, and we know that Rick Tocchet apparently has, at least I don't think it's happened yet, but is scheduled for his third interview, which many believe make him the odds-on favorite to be named the head coach. But it is believed that Ron Francis does want to continue to meet with a few more candidates. There's some other people still apparently in the mix that haven't been out to do a formal interview in person as of yet. It's believed David Quinn has had one or maybe even two interviews, but it's believed that he's likely not in the running any longer. But they did mention on headlines that the other guys that Francis apparently is waiting to talk to, of course, is Tony Granato, former player, had a great run as a college coach, of course, coached in the NHL before, and as well as Joe Sacco, Boston assistant. So obviously we'll have to see what things transpire here with the Kraken, but I still think Tocchet is the likely leading contender, and I wouldn't be surprised here if we do get an announcement sometime in the next week or so. Now, before we jump into today's trade talk, I do want to have a moment here to pause and acknowledge our channel sponsor, Manscaped. Top Shelf Hockey is proud to be sponsored by Manscaped. Of course, with Manscaped, we have a special offer here for all Top Shelf Hockey viewers where you can get 20% off and free shipping on all orders at manscaped.com. Now, of course, Manscaped just launched a brand new Lawnmower 4.0 trimmer, which is a fantastic product. They've taken the level up here even again with the skin-safe replaceable blades. It's waterproof, it's wireless charging, has a travel lock on it, as well as a nice light so you don't miss what you're doing. So certainly a terrific product. Now, many people associate Manscaped with their trimmers, which is certainly kind of their top product, but they do have a lot of other great options as well, including what they call the Weed Whacker, which is another trimmer for your ears and nose. And they have a variety of deodorants and sprays as well, which also keep you fresh and are terrific as well. So certainly Manscaped has a lot to offer, and we certainly highly recommend all of their products. So check out manscaped.com and use promo code TSH for 20% off and free shipping. So thanks very much for watching that promotional video. It's greatly appreciated, as well as the support from the sponsor. Now, diving into today's content around NHL Trade Rumours, I want to talk about Oliver Ekman Larsson. Now, if you've been following along with my NHL off-season plan series, we obviously we're quite a ways into that now, where a lot of the NHL teams have had their video released from our channel here. And right now with the Coyotes, I talked about the fact that I felt that the Ekman Larsson trade talks were likely going to be reignited, and maybe even a guy like Phil Kessel could find himself on the move as well. And now we get confirmation of that from via Elliot Friedman on headlines last night here on Hockey Night in Canada. Now, there was no talk about Phil Kessel, at least as of yet, but it is believed that Oliver Ekman Larsson's name is back out there in a trade rumor mill, and they're going about this in a different way than they did before. Last year, they talked to Ekman Larsson. They found out what teams he'd be willing to waive to, which he only gave two, which were the Boston Bruins and Vancouver Canucks. They tried to work out deals with those teams and never came to an agreement, and therefore he never ended up getting traded. But he does have a full no move, so he will have to approve any deal that is presented to him. But what they've decided to do to talk to more teams around the league is that they're going to just talk to as many interested parties as possible and then present any offers for trade to him to see if he would approve it. So it sounds like both parties are more eager to get this done than they were a year ago. I know Ekman Larsson talked a lot about the fact that he signed a long-term deal. He really liked it there, wanted to stay, or he wouldn't have signed and all that, likes living in the area. That's all likely true, but I think after another frustrating season from him, I know I've seen comments about his confidence being shot. I think it might be best, if this can be worked out, that he get a change of scenery and that the team move on. If the team is going to be going through obviously some rebuilding times here, it's not, or maybe a retool, I'm not sure what you call it in Arizona, because they're not quite the same predicament as a team like Buffalo, but they're a team that's been constantly retooling and somewhat rebuilding here for quite a stretch. So it doesn't make sense to have an $8.25 million defenseman lead that team. And to be honest, I don't think he's really lived up to the expectations that come with that contract. And a lot of that can be put on him. And to a degree, some of it can be put on his teammates and just the general team around him. Every player is going to, end up with different stats and different results based on not only their own play, but what's going on around them as well. So to me, having him move on does make a lot of sense. And if he's, at this point, willing to at least listen to offers from around the league, that says he's more open to it as well. So I think it's more likely that we see something get done. Could it happen before the draft? It's possible. I don't know if there's really a timetable on this, but obviously ahead of next season. I know last summer when Ekman Larsson was willing to entertain offers from Vancouver and Boston, at that point in time, at least they did give a deadline. Said if it's not done by a certain date, then we're done and we're going to training camp and we're proceeding here as is with the current team. So that may be the case. We might get more details on that as time goes on here. But obviously, I would think that teams like Vancouver and Boston might revisit this. I think Boston's more likely than Vancouver. They still have some holes on their left side. And obviously, that contract amount, though, might be a tough pill to swallow. So Arizona might have to eat some money on that, or they might need a third team to consider brokering a deal if that can be worked out. So we'll see what happens, but Ekman Larsson's expected to be traded. His name is out there, and they're dealing with a lot more teams than they were in the past, which certainly increases the odds of something like this possibly getting done. Now, I also want to talk a bit more about Jack Eichel. We have a word from Larry Brooks of the New York Post today, indicating that he has sources saying that the Blackhawks are indeed involved in the Jack Eichel sweepstakes. For the Sabres to consider a deal with Chicago, it's almost a certainty they're going to want Kirby Dach coming back in return, as well as that first-round pick from this year's NHL draft, which is 11th overall. I do think that there would likely have to be more involved in the process here. It was reported before the Sabres are looking for 4 or 5 solid young assets, or equivalent to what you'd get either a first-round pick or a player that maybe has been previously drafted at that. So you're looking at probably on top of that probably a more of an established roster piece, and then maybe another prospect or another pick or something to that effect. There'd have to be more than just those two things in there for an Eichel trade to work with the Blackhawks. And I would think from a money standpoint, they'd want at least one contract that's a little bit more value to be taken back on the other side. I'm not sure right off who that could be, but it's certainly something that they would have to consider here, at least you would think. So the Chicago Blackhawks are yet another team involved here. I know we've talked on and off about Eichel, but all the different teams involved. You've got teams like the Rangers, the Kings, the Wild. I've heard teams like even the Blues and the Flames to some degree, Boston, but I'm not sure a lot of those teams have the necessary assets. I think the Anaheim Ducks are definitely going to be a team to watch. I'm not sure how the Rangers and Kings are feeling about this, because we keep getting mixed reporting and messages that they're in or they're out, they're in or they're out. And you know what? I'm not sure what's actually legit. I think to a degree they're all going to be in up to the last minute, because why wouldn't you be? It only makes sense. You get an opportunity to grab a player like this, you're going to at least be in on the conversations. Doesn't mean you pull the trigger, but you can negotiate and see what you can make work out for your team. So obviously lots of talk going on. Not surprising to hear Bowman being involved in some big time players. We talked yesterday about the fact that the Hawks and Bowman were believed to be interested in Seth Jones, or possibly even Dougie Hamilton, who they could possibly sign through free agency. Obviously this is not a scenario where they're going to be able to bring in likely multiple of these players, given the fact that they all come with a big ticket, and that they only have so much salary cap space. Now, the Blackhawks do have a little bit of wiggle room, given the fact they have contracts for Brent Seabrook and Andrew Shaw that can still go on long-term injury reserve, and they can spend above the cap because of that. But it's still a scenario that they can only take on so much, of course. So we'll see what happens. But based on what we're hearing, it sounds like the Blackhawks might be a team to watch to make at least one aggressive move this offseason. Of course, we still don't know 100% Jonathan Toews. He's expected to come back, but we don't really have any full-fledged confirmation on that from the team here as of right now. And it's probably going to be some time before we really hear much about his situation. At least it's quite possible it could be. So we'll see what happens. So let me know your thoughts on everything discussed here today down in the comments, and we can discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news, rumors, and everything else around the NHL's all 32 teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.